In the cold silence of a stark interrogation room, the billionaire CEO sat handcuffed, his usually sharp suit now rumpled and stained with defeat. His gaze, once commanding, was fixed silently on the small child standing before him, wide-eyed, fragile, innocent. The contrast between the vast empire he once ruled and the fragile life now confronting him was jarring. Above, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, casting harsh shadows. Outside the glass tower he once commanded, the city glittered indifferent to his fall. His face, plastered across the cover of Time magazine, showed the man who built an empire yet couldn't save what mattered most. A voice broke the stillness. He built an empire, but he couldn't save her. No names. No backstory. Just a raw, haunting moment suspended in time. The flash of cameras outside barely reached inside the lonely glass tower where the CEO now sat shattered. Media frenzy had stripped away every last fragment of privacy. As his sobs echoed against the cold steel and glass, no one saw the man beneath the facade, just the fall of a titan. Inside, memories played like silent movies, deals struck, empires built, lives controlled. Yet here in this moment, he was powerless. The weight of public failure pressed down, crushing what little hope remained. "They see a broken man," the voice whispered, "but only one thing really matters now." The question hung in the air. Could love be his salvation or his final undoing? The child's eyes held a storm of emotions, confusion, fear, and a strange flicker of hope. This was no ordinary encounter, it was a collision of worlds. The CEO's empire had been built on control and power, but now those constructs crumbled in front of a fragile innocence. The silence between them was heavy, filled with unsaid apologies and shattered dreams. Somewhere deep inside, a seed of something new stirred, perhaps forgiveness or a chance to rebuild. The story wasn't just about loss. It was about what could still be saved. Outside the tower, the world spun relentlessly on. Headlines screamed, shareholders panicked, and rivals whispered. But inside, time slowed. The CEO's sobs softened, replaced by a hollow quiet. His empire was a cage, and now it was empty. The child took a tentative step forward, breaking through the barrier of despair. No words were exchanged, but in that moment something unspoken passed between them, a fragile connection bridging two broken souls. It was the beginning of a reckoning neither expected. A voice whispered in the silence, the final thread holding together this fragile moment. He built an empire, but he couldn't save her. No names, no explanation, just truth laid bare. The billionaire CEO sat imprisoned by his own choices, facing the child who held his last chance at redemption. The glass tower, the headlines, the power, they all meant nothing here. In this moment of shock and raw vulnerability, the story began not with triumph, but with loss, and the fragile hope that love might still conquer all. The story was never about the man alone. It was about the scars carried beneath his tailored suits, scars invisible to the world. A young girl watched from a distance, her small hands clenched tightly as she witnessed her father's empire crumble. She vowed silently, "I will never be like him." The bitterness of failure was etched into her memories, the hollow sound of promises broken. Yet within her burned a quiet fire, forged from the pain of watching someone she loved fall apart. This wound would shape her, fuel her ascent, or doom her forever. She was the silent heir to a legacy of loss, and the weight of that inheritance would be her cross to bear. Years later, the same girl, now a young woman, sat at the edge of a vast boardroom. Her back was turned to the polished oak table, and the stern faces watching her. She was a force to be reckoned with, but her heart still bore the wounds of abandonment and expectation. Success had come at a cost, a constant battle between proving her worth and keeping the ghosts of her past at bay. The cold stares of her own board felt like echoes of a childhood, where love was conditional and power was the only language spoken. "I won't be broken," she told herself, steeling her resolve for the fight ahead. In a cramped, cluttered convenience store, a boy sat alone on a stool behind the counter. His mother, worn and desperate, pleaded quietly with a manager outside. The boy's eyes betrayed his fear and loneliness, a stark contrast to the bustling world beyond the glass doors. The struggle for survival was etched in every crease on his mother's face, a silent battle fought daily in shadows and whispered prayers. This boy carried a secret burden, the hope that one day they might escape the cycle of hardship. But today was about endurance, about holding on to love when everything else slipped away. Each of these children carried more than just memories. They bore the weight of legacy, shame, love, fear, and fire intertwined in their veins. The child who vowed never to be like their parent, the young woman hardened by boardroom battles, the boy clinging to hope in the face of despair. These wounds would forge their power, shape their decisions, and haunt their nights. The journey to power was never clean or simple. It was messy, painful, and deeply personal. The audience could feel the rawness of their struggles, sensing that what they carried was both a burden and a fuel for what was yet to come. From shattered homes to polished offices, the thread that tied these lives was undeniable, a longing for control in a world that had spun wildly out of their hand. Each faced the same invisible enemy: fear. Fear of failure, abandonment, and repeating the past. But fear was also their catalyst. It pushed them beyond limits, drove sleepless nights, and built empires from ashes. This was not a story of perfect heroes, but of broken souls striving to reclaim what was lost. In the quiet moments between chaos, they each wondered if love could be the force strong enough to rewrite their destinies. The young woman's journey began not with fanfare, but with sleepless nights bathed in the cold glow of a laptop screen. She pitched her first daring business idea to skeptical investors, her voice steady despite the pounding fear inside. Friends faded into the background, birthdays passed unnoticed, and love became a distant memory. Each small victory felt hollow, shadowed by the sacrifices she made. Yet, with every step forward, she grew stronger. The empire she dreamed of was fragile, but hers to build. The cost was rising, but so was her resolve. She whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." Her pitch room was a battleground, walls lined with skeptical faces and clipped nods. The air was thick with tension as she laid out her vision, the weight of expectation heavy on her shoulders. Each question was a challenge, each doubt a barrier to break. But she met them head-on, her passion igniting the room despite the doubts. It was a victory not just for business, but for every moment she had fought to prove she belonged. Still, the loneliness lingered. Success tasted bittersweet when the price was your own heart. No. Time slipped by in a blur of meetings, strategy sessions, and endless phone calls. Lost birthdays became a painful reminder of the cost. Invitations from old friends were left unanswered. Lovers became memories too distant to hold. Every hour spent building her empire chipped away at the life she once imagined. Yet, in this relentless pace, she found a strange comfort: control. Control over the chaos of her past, control over her future. But with each gain, the price grew steeper, and the cracks in her armor began to show. Despite the mounting toll, the young woman's empire grew. Boardrooms became her battlegrounds. Every negotiation was a test of will. Allies came and went, some betrayed, others true. The victories piled up, contracts signed, markets conquered, brands built. But they felt distant, like trophies in a game she no longer enjoyed. Friends and lovers lost in the process were silent reminders of what ambition demanded. Her reflection in the office windows showed not the woman she once was, but a warrior forged in fire. The question remained, was it worth it? Her rise was meteoric but fraught with sacrifice. Each step forward in the ruthless corporate world was shadowed by the ghosts of loneliness and lost connection. Sleepless nights were punctuated by doubts and fleeting moments of regret. Yet, she pressed on, driven by a fire that refused to be quenched. The empire was taking shape, but so was the question of what she had left behind. The climb had begun, but the cost was far from paid. And somewhere beneath the power and ambition, a quiet hope whispered that it might still be worth everything. Just as the empire seemed unshakable, the ground beneath it began to crumble. The revelation hit like a thunderclap. The business was never truly hers alone. Behind closed doors, contracts and agreements painted a different story, one where power had been shared, but trust had been broken. Her closest confidant and co-founder, someone she thought was an ally, was revealed to be her own sibling, a secret kept to manipulate and control. Betrayal ran deep, unraveling years of loyalty and ambition. The foundation cracked, and the fortress she built teetered on the brink of collapse. Worse still, the mentor she had revered, the guiding hand who promised wisdom, was caught stealing from the company's coffers. The revelation sent shockwaves through the boardroom. Whispers of deceit turned into open accusations. The young woman stood frozen, grappling with the enormity of the deception. The person she had trusted most had shattered not just the company's future, but the fragile trust she'd built. The walls of her carefully constructed world closed in. How could she lead when those closest to her were betraying everything she stood for? Amidst the chaos, a darker truth emerged. She was fighting not just external battles, but a personal war she hadn't shared. Diagnosed with a terminal illness, she kept the secret buried deep, fearing it would shatter the team's morale. Each day became a race against time, her strength waning, but her resolve hardening. She bore the burden silently, masking pain behind steely determination. The empire she fought for was no longer just business. It was a legacy she hoped to leave behind, even if she couldn't stay to see it flourish. The boardroom was no longer just a place of deals, but of fragile alliances and whispered fears. Rumors swirled like smoke, and every decision felt like walking a tightrope over a crumbling abyss. Friends turned wary, some plotting their escape, others waiting for the final collapse. The young woman realized she was isolated, a leader trapped by secrets and betrayals. Yet in this fractured landscape, a fierce clarity emerged. She would face the storm alone if she had to. Her empire might falter, but her will would not break. The floor dropped out from under her just as she prepared for what should have been the defining moment. The company was her life's work, but now it felt like a fragile house of cards, vulnerable to one wrong move. She whispered to herself in a rare moment of vulnerability, "No, wait, Tao." The weight of truth, betrayal, and impending loss crushed her briefly, but it also steeled her resolve. This was no longer just a business story. It was a battle for identity, legacy, and survival. The stakes had never been higher, and the world was watching. The boardroom was electric with anticipation, the air thick with unspoken fears and hopes. The young woman stood resolute at the head of the table, the weight of the entire company pressing down on her shoulders. Every pair of eyes in the room was fixed upon her, some filled with skepticism, others with quiet support. This wasn't just a vote on business strategy. It was a crossroads of morality, legacy, and survival. She took a breath, feeling the pulse of history in that moment. The silence before her voice rose was deafening, as if the room itself held its breath. This was the emotional summit she had dreaded and dreamed of, a decision that would either shatter everything she built or cement her place as a true leader. The stakes were colossal, and the moment was raw. Her voice cut through the charged atmosphere, steady, yet layered with vulnerability and raw honesty. "I stand here not just as your CEO, but as someone who has made mistakes, who has hidden pain behind ambition," she began. Her words trembled slightly, then grew stronger, echoing through the room. She apologized for the times she prioritized control over connection, for the moments lost to power struggles, and for the walls she built to hide her fears. The apology wasn't merely a formality, it was a confession, a brave unveiling of her humanity to a room full of judgment. Some faces softened, their defenses melting into empathy. Others remained guarded, weighing if trust could ever be fully restored. It was a speech that exposed the fragile heart beneath the armor, making her both vulnerable and unbreakable. The final votes were cast, the room hanging on the edge of silence. A digital tally illuminated the far wall, its glow reflecting in the wide eyes of everyone present. Time seemed to stretch as the results slowly unfolded, an agonizing weight filled with hope and dread. Allies exchanged tentative glances and clasped hands, the fragile threads of unity pulled taut by uncertainty. In that suspended moment, the young woman's gaze drifted inward, reconnecting with the child she once was, the frightened girl who vowed never to be broken. This was her reckoning, the summit of a long climb marked by sacrifice, betrayal, and relentless determination. The verdict was more than a business decision. It was a testament to resilience and transformation. The Empire's fate was sealed, but her journey had only just begun. The boardroom emptied, leaving behind a charged silence. In a quiet corner, the young woman found herself face to face with the man who had once been her father's closest confidant, a figure now tangled in the family's fractured legacy. Without words, they embraced, a silent acknowledgement of the pain, forgiveness, and uncertainty that defined their shared history. The moment was fragile, yet powerful, a brief refuge before the inevitable storms to come. In that embrace was the raw truth that no empire, no matter how vast or powerful, could survive without the bonds of family and trust. The fire of ambition had shaped them, but love, however complicated, remained their truest inheritance. Alone by the vast window overlooking the city, the young woman stood silhouetted against the glittering skyline. The hum of the night below was a distant murmur compared to the storm of emotions within. The boardroom battle was over, but the internal war raged on. The empire might never look the same, and the path forward was uncertain and steep. Yet beneath the crushing weight of responsibility, a quiet strength blossomed, a resolve forged in fire and tempered by sacrifice. The last vestiges of doubt gave way to a profound clarity. The fight was far from over, but she was ready to face whatever came next. In that moment, the city's lights were not just reflections, they were beacons of possibility. After the storm of conflict and revelation, the young woman found herself standing quietly on the rooftop of the very tower, where her empire had been forged and fractured. The dawn's soft light spilled over the city, casting long shadows and painting the skyline in gentle golds and blues. This was a moment of fragile clarity, no longer the relentless CEO chasing control, but a survivor embracing the lessons of loss and resilience. The sacrifices she had made, the friendships lost, the love sacrificed, the sleepless nights, were etched deep within her. Yet, amid the quiet hum of the awakening city, she felt something new: peace. Legacy, she now understood, was not a monument of power, but the enduring strength that remained when everything else was gone. She inhaled the crisp morning air, ready to rebuild, not just a company, but herself. Far from the bustling boardrooms and relentless pressure, the older man, the father, had discovered a different kind of strength in his quiet solitude. The empire he had built, once the center of his world, was now a legacy defined by sacrifice and regret. He poured what remained of his energy, not into reclaiming lost power, but into protecting the company's fragile future and nurturing the relationships he had neglected for so long. In the soft glow of his study, surrounded by memories, faded photographs, awards, and company artifacts, he reflected on a life marked by ambition and loneliness. Redemption was not about grand gestures or public applause, but about small, steady acts of love and commitment. In those moments, he found a peace that eluded him for years, realizing that true strength lay in sacrifice, forgiveness, and the hope for renewal. The young woman who once waged fierce battles in boardrooms now found herself on a very different path, one of quiet self-discovery and healing. She left behind the relentless pursuit of power, not as surrender, but as a courageous choice to reclaim her identity beyond titles and expectations. Walking barefoot along a tranquil beach at sunset, she let the waves wash away the weight of ambition and regret. The horizon stretched endless and inviting, colored in soft pinks, oranges, and purples, mirroring the peace blooming within her. This was not the end, but a new beginning, a chance to nurture parts of herself that had been buried beneath layers of control and sacrifice. In surrender, she discovered freedom. In stepping away, she found strength. The future was uncertain, but now it was hers to shape on her own terms. Legacy, she realized, was not forged solely in boardrooms or in the accumulation of wealth and titles. It was born in the messy, imperfect moments of sacrifice, love, and resilience. The intertwined stories of the father, the daughter, and the child, each carrying wounds and hopes, were the true inheritance. The company they had built together was a reflection of human brilliance marred by flaws and failures, but also of courage to persevere. They bore scars that no balance sheet could quantify. Shame, fear, love, and fire woven into their very beings. Yet from that tangled tapestry emerged something profound, a testament not to genius, but to heart. It was a legacy that would endure beyond profits, rooted in the raw, unvarnished truth of their journey. In the hushed quiet of reflection, the truth settled deep and unshakable. Not every battle would be won, but the war was far from over. The empire they built, brilliant, flawed, and human, was more than just contracts and buildings. It was the sum of every sacrifice, every heartbreak, every spark of hope that refused to die. The young woman closed her eyes and breathed in slowly, the weight of the past lifting just enough to allow space for grace and strength. She had lost much along the way, but had gained something far more precious, herself. This was not a story of triumphant conquest, but of painful, poetic resolution. And within that resolution, beneath the ashes of what was lost, the future gleamed softly with promise, quiet but undeniable. The final act began in silence, a quiet moment before the closing storm. The young woman stood alone in the now empty boardroom, the weight of her journey heavy, but somehow lighter in the stillness. The city beyond the glass walls sparkled like a field of stars, indifferent to the battles fought within these walls. Her reflection stared back, strong, vulnerable, transformed. In that silence, a single thought echoed. He left the company, but never left her. It was a reminder that though power had shifted and empires changed hands, the ties that truly mattered endured. The story's final chapters were not about endings, but about the bonds that survived and shaped what was to come. In a quiet room, a mirror reflected a face weathered by trials, but shining with newfound clarity. The young woman's eyes met her own gaze, a silent conversation passing between who she was and who she had become. Behind her, fireworks erupted in the distant sky, bright, fleeting, beautiful. They illuminated the night like fleeting moments of joy and triumph, in a life defined by struggle. The world outside celebrated, but inside, she held a profound stillness. This was not a victory parade, but a quiet reckoning. The woman in the mirror whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." Meanwhile, a child's small hand reached up toward an empty boardroom chair, symbol of power, legacy, and promise. It was a quiet gesture, filled with hope and uncertainty. The child's future was unwritten, shaped by the sacrifices of those who came before. The empty chair was both an invitation and a challenge, a reminder that the cycle of ambition, love, and struggle would continue. In that moment, the story came full circle. The past's shadows mingled with the light of what was yet to come. The child's fingers brushed the leather seat gently, as if daring to dream. The glass tower, once a symbol of unyielding power, now stood as a monument to transformation. Its reflective walls captured not only the cityscape, but the stories etched within. From the shadows of despair to the light of redemption, the tower had witnessed ambition, betrayal, loss, and love. It was more than architecture. It was a silent witness to human frailty and resilience. As night deepened, the building's lights flickered softly, a heartbeat pulsing through steel and glass. The story had ended here, but its echoes would reverberate forever. And so the story closed, not with fanfare, but with a quiet, powerful truth. The young woman, the man, the child, they were bound by love, sacrifice, and the courage to face the unknown. The empire they built was not just about control, but connection. In the stillness of the final moments, one line hung in the air like a whispered promise. He left the company, but never left her. The legacy was not in titles or riches, but in hearts forever intertwined. The future was uncertain, but alive with possibility. The story's last breath carried a gentle hope, because sometimes, love is the strongest empire of all.